Well, thank you for joining us for our sixth session in our online marketing webinar series called Photography Tips for Websites and Social Media. We are extremely grateful to have Doug Edlund from the Institute of Agriculture joining us as today's instructor. We also greatly appreciate the support of the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture and the Southern Risk Management Education Center to help make this series possible. To report the impact of this webinar to the agencies, I will ask you all to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end, and I'll post the link in the chat box, and it'll be on a slide I'll put up at the end as well. Except for Doug, we'll ask everybody to keep your microphones on mute and your video turned off to aid in streaming and help with distraction. And we would ask everyone if you would put your name and location in the chat box. That will help me kind of record attendance and see who's here. It is so neat to see that we have folks from several states and all across Tennessee joining us. So we appreciate you being here and for helping us record that in the chat box. I am recording the session and will post it online in case you would like to view it again or share it with somebody else. And with that, I will unshare my screen and give Doug control so he can enlighten us and give us some tips on how we can make our images better for website and social media. We know that's really important in helping to drive engagement.
All right, well, thank you, Megan. I really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead. Let's see. I'm trying to share my screen here. Hold on. Whiteboard. I can't share my screen here. Oh, here we go. Is this it? Yeah. No? Share. There we go. Okay, now I'm sharing my desktop. Here we go. All righty. Sorry about that, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started here. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is shooting with a smartphone. Because if you're shooting, especially for social media, odds are you're going to be shooting with a smartphone. And a lot of what you're going to see today, pretty much everything, was shot on an iPhone. Some of it was shot on an iPhone 8, some was shot on a 7, one was even shot on a 4. I don't have a lot of experience with Android, but at the same time, a lot of these principles are going to apply to anything, whether or not you're using even a smartphone, a point and shoot, or even if you're using a DSLR camera. So I'm going to just get started and tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an assistant director for marketing and communications here at the UT Institute of Agriculture. I've been here for almost 20 years now. And my job basically is doing a little bit of everything, but they take my picture and use it in different things. So anyway, before they took my picture and used it in different things, I was a news photographer. I worked for WBIR TV in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's the NBC affiliate here. And I worked there from 1987 to 1999. I graduated from UT and then joined up with Channel 10 and then worked there for a long time. So a lot of my philosophy behind shooting is the fact that in news, we could not go back and reshoot it again. So we had to make it work right the first time. And so that's the way my philosophy has always been with photography. I don't do a lot of video manipulate or audio or any manipulation with it. I just like to use it as it is. And so I try to work with the situation I have and make it work the best I can. So let's talk a little bit about smartphones. I'm sure you don't want to listen to me tell you old war stories from my news days. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the advantages you have in today's smartphones. One of the advantages today are camera improvements. If you remember, and a lot of you probably do, remember when flip phones used to have a camera on them? And that thing was horrible. And I think that's being charitable to say that it was horrible because those pictures were terrible. Cameras in smartphones, whether they're an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy or a Google Pixel, have had vast improvements over the years. They are just shooting really, really good images. For example, in this image here, this is just of a pumpkin patch where we were going to look for a Halloween pumpkin. And I had an iPhone 7S, and I wanted to play around with the portrait mode feature that it has. And I really was surprised at the way this turned out. The detail, the image, the way the light played off the image, the detail on the stem, the detail on the pumpkin. And I was just thinking, I don't really need to have a point-and-shoot camera anymore, because these cameras are now starting to replace the point-and-shoots across the board. I don't think they're yet at the stage of replacing a DSLR camera, because those are very, very good cameras. While the smartphones have much better optics than they used to have, they have dual lenses, image stabilization, better sensors, higher megapixel counts, although megapixel counts don't really mean everything. It's better to have a better lens and a better image sensor than have a jillion megapixels. Megapixels are just if you're going to blow the image up on a wall or something. Usually 5 to 12 megapixels will get you a good image. And I just think that, you know, they're going to improve more and more. There's rumors that the new iPhones coming out next year will have 3 lenses instead of 2. And it's just going to continue and continue. I don't know how many lenses they're going to put on these things. I think it's for virtual reality that they're putting more and more lenses on them. But in this case, 2 lenses works really, really well, and you can get some really good results. Now, this picture I did not take. I snagged that one from Google. But the phone is always with you. This is the one thing that a phone has as an advantage over even a point-and-shoot camera. If you have a point-and-shoot camera, you've always got to make an effort to find it and take it with you. You may keep it in a bag, you may keep it in something with you, but it's not the same as having that phone in your pocket on you at all times. And that's why a lot of times these cameras are turning into the best camera you have, maybe the one that you have in your pocket. And it's with you all the time. You can capture images, you can capture things as they happen, and you don't have to really plan shoots as much because you've got that camera with you at all times. I mean, just a few shots here that I had taken. This was with an iPhone 8 Plus, and just shots at a quarry around Knox County, out in East Knox County. My daughter had an outdoor day there, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to see what this camera can do. And again, you can get some really good detail and really good focus on a camera like this. Camera in the lower right, that shot in the lower right, I think that's the obligatory shot of a kayak that everybody takes when they have a kayak by a lake. I think everybody takes that shot, but I just thought it was cool to just, you know, show the color contrast and how well the color came out. There's no manipulation in these photos. These are the way they turned out. And the other one was just, I wanted to get some detail of a cactus. We were on a trip in Arizona and just wanted to see how, you know, you could get that detail up close and personal with your smartphone camera. So I'm going to give you some shooting tips, and that's why you came here, and that's why you're on the seminar, and I hope this will be useful to you. But we're going to go over composition, we're going to go over what I call leading lines, and we're going to go over lighting. And I think these are the 3 things that will really, really help you to improve your smartphone shooting or any kind of shooting on any kind of camera, whether it's a DSLR, a point and shoot, a smartphone, or even a video camera. We'll go over some video tips in a little bit here as well. So let's start off with composition. This is an iPhone 8 Plus, just taken in New Orleans. I was at a conference and I was out wandering around one day. I guess I should have been going to the sessions, but I was out seeing what was going on in the town. And when my rule of composition that I like to do, I like to be able to look into a photo for the most part. I don't like a photo that's flat, for example. I like to be able to use objects or people or whatever to kind of help my eye go into the photo. So for example, here in the left-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice that the buildings help lead your eye down the screen and into the photo. You're looking into it rather than just looking at a two-dimensional object. Even though it is two-dimensional, it feels more three-dimensional. For example, I kept you can see a guy riding a bike down there. You can see more and more things that you didn't realize before that you see when you look into a photo and you try to compose them in a way that you look into them. Now, some of you may be familiar with the rule of thirds, but this is something that is very important in your composition. Your smartphones have this grid that you can actually put on your camera app, and you can actually set that in your settings, so you can actually, have your screen divided into thirds. It's divided into thirds both vertically and horizontally. And what you really want to do is you don't want to always have your subject in the exact center of the screen. And the reason you don't want to do that, it would be fine. You could put that lighthouse in the middle there. I did not take this shot, by the way. This was also a Google image. But you could put that lighthouse in the middle. And it would, aesthetically, it would be perfectly fine. But at the same time, it just isn't as visually interesting. So when you keep your object, the primary object of your photo, your subject, off center in one of the thirds, in the right or left third, you just have a lot more visual interest. And you look across that picture versus just looking straight at one thing. In a way, you look at the lighthouse and then you look off to the left. And you can see the ocean, and you can see the rocks, and you can see all of that. And it just creates for a much more visually interesting image. This is a shot I had taken just because I liked the sunset that day, and we were looking. There were Jeeps at this place too. My daughter wants to get a Jeep. We are not looking for a Maserati for her, so I don't want you guys to think that I'm out looking at Maseratis. But it was just a really pretty evening, and I just wanted to use, you don't have to have bright light to get a good shot. And this is a good example of how the image sensors of the smartphones are so much better than they used to be. There's a little bit of grain in this image, and if you blew it up, you would see some of that grain. But overall, it's aesthetically pleasing. Again, you have the dealership off to the left, or the right, rather. And, it leads your eye into the sunset. The only thing I don't like about that photo is that light pole in the middle. I wish I could have, but because I don't like to go back and Photoshop everything, I would like to have taken that out. But outside of that, that's, again, just using, that rule of thirds and leading lines to get your eyes through the photo. It's not just a two-dimensional photo. Again, similar thing with downtown Memphis, using buildings, again, to frame your shots is what to help you look into the shot. So the eye bank on the right, again in the third, leads your eye into the picture. It isn't just a flat picture. You're looking down at the other buildings in downtown. You see the bridge off in the distance, and you can see the Mississippi River off in the distance. Another example, again, using the palm tree in the left third. I use that to help frame that shot of the church in New Orleans. And you can see it kind of leads your eye down to the church. If you take a look that way, you start with the tree, you see Andrew Jackson, you see the church. So again, you're looking into the shot. You're not just looking at a flat shot. And that's, to me, that's pleasing to my eye. And that's what I like to see. And even the detail of the clouds, it just creates an image. The clouds detail makes the background of the church stand out, or stand out from the background. So I'm just very pleased with the way that one turned out. At Biltmore, again, I like to put shots, and I like to put objects in the foreground and have an object in the background. Again, that's creating that look of looking into the photo. By having that statue off on the right, it helps you look back into the photo and see the building in the background as well. Even though this is the primary subject, it still creates that depth to that photo. So you're looking into the photo. You're not just looking at a flat object. This is a flatter shot. And this is a good example of a flatter shot. This is just a typical portrait. This was Thanksgiving a year ago at my house. It was warm enough to be like 70 degrees. We're outside and just taking a shot of my daughter and our two dogs, Enzo and Oakley. But again, I try to make it look into it as much as possible. Have the fence be a little bit of a way to draw your eye toward Christina and have her offset again from the background. But this is a flatter shot, I guess an example of what I would call a flatter shot. Which leads us to the topic of leading lines. And I think leading lines are the things that help really, as a part of your composition, give your photo a lot of visual interest. Like if you're looking at the Riverwalk in San Antonio here, you follow the river down into the photo, and then you see the other things as you initially follow the river down. You kind of look at the people, you look at the trees, you look at the other things there. So it's making you look into that photo and see what else is there rather than just on the surface. Just a photo, just I just snapped this one. This was the same day we were out at the quarry. Again, using the line to go down or up, whichever way. Usually your eye is going to train, go down into the shot. Again, looking down at the berries and just looking at how you just look into it rather than just flatly looking at it. I promise when I took this picture, I was not driving. But this is the Ravenel Bridge in Charleston. And again, using the lines of the suspension. And it makes you look down into the photo, and you look up at the arch, and you look then down into the roadway, and you're looking into that photo. You're not just looking flatly at it. Again, the lines from the side lead you in, which are the suspension cables. They lead you into the photo, and that's why I really, really like the concept of leading lines and using those leading lines to help bring you into the picture. Using a sidewalk. The focus of my photo there is that building in San Antonio, but using that sidewalk to lead your eye down to the building. And you also have the apartments on the left-hand third and the trees that frame the building. All of that works together to help draw you to that subject rather than just, I could have taken a picture of the building, it would have been fine, but I liked using a line that draws your eye down toward the building rather than just the building itself. This is just a basic shot. This was we were having an honors banquet here on campus, and I was down helping set up a couple of things with some of the electronics that were being set up down there. We were getting a tweet wall set up. That's also part of my job. I get to deal with a lot of electronic things on this job in addition to everything else. But again, I like the way that Power T was in the center, or kind of off-centered there if you'll look. But the tables lead you down to that. The tables make you look down into the shot again. The repetitive shots, the repetition of the chairs, the repetition of the menus, and the everything that's on the table makes you look into the photo again. On an aircraft carrier, again, using leading lines, looking down the shot, I use the frame, use the South Carolina flag and left to kind of set a perspective and then make you look down. If you kind of look here and then you look at the flag and you look to your right and you look down the deck. The 10 on the deck also helps push your focus down toward the planes and the people and the bridge of the ship, of the aircraft carrier. I believe that is the USS Yorktown. They have it. It's called Patriots Point in Charleston. It's a really neat place. If you get a chance to go see it, I'd highly recommend it. Or a sidewalk, an alley in downtown Knoxville. We were downtown one night, and there's this really cool artist alley where people do different types of graffiti, and it's set up as art. And again, you're looking down into the shot. You lead down. The sidewalk takes your eye down. The lights take your eye down. And I like just looking down. I love looking into photos because I like to discover things. I like a photo that you look at that you have to spend you have to work on it a little bit. You got to look for the stuff and you have to discover things in it. And I love that part about how you can do that and how you can look into photos and see things. And you can come back and look at this photo again and go, oh, I didn't realize that was there, because you see something new every time. So that's just why I think if there's anything about photography, if you can get yourself, compose your photos in ways that you look into the photo, I think that's going to be just very, very, very helpful. Again, just using the metro in DC to look down into the metro tunnel station, look down into the station, use the roof and use the metro that puts your eye into the shot. And again, seeing things you wouldn't normally see and seeing things you would discover when you go back to look at the shot again later. The other important thing I wanted to talk to you guys today about is lighting. And lighting is, I think lighting, in addition to composition, a well-composed photo, but if a well-composed photo does not have good lighting, it's not going to be a good photo. Lighting, in a way, will make or break your photography. And one of the things that I like to do with a smartphone or a DSLR or any other kind of camera is that I like to use the light that I have available. And again, I think this is coming from working in news, because we really didn't have the luxury of setting a bunch of lights up. Sometimes we would do it for an interview if we had time. A lot of times we didn't. But I really like to use what I have. And I'm going to just go off on a little sidetrack here. For those of you who may be familiar with this, it's an older movie called Barry Lyndon. And it's a boring movie. I'm not going to say that it was an exciting movie. It's a boring movie. It was set in England before the American Revolution. It was a Stanley Kubrick film. But what made that movie so fascinating to me was not as much the story, but the way it was shot. Kubrick used no artificial lighting at all in that story. Because, again, they didn't have light bulbs back in the 1700s. All the lighting was done with candles. All the lighting was done with natural light. And it just made the shot look so much better. And so that's why I'm always going to be a very big proponent of use the light you have. Sometimes you have to use a flash in your lighting or in your photography. But I would, unless you absolutely have to, I would go with what I have. So that would be my suggestion there. That shot of Oakley, our dog, just sitting on the couch, that's just natural lighting. He's being lit from a lamp that's off to the right. And there's another lamp that's farther off on the left. But that's what I use to light him, just the lamp itself. You can go outside, and this is when you get really good, obviously this is a pretty good shot, but there's nothing special about it. There's no real skill to this shot. Anybody could really go out and get this shot. But I just wanted to demonstrate how you can use lighting and how it shows detail. You see the detail of the clouds. You see how the light changes from where the sun is setting further into the photo, and using the trees to frame the sky. And I just love the way you can just look at the details of the sky and using the lighting that's there to show the detail of what you can see in those clouds. Here's a shot. This is from Red Rocks. I think I took this years and years ago. I was at a conference. This is actually a shot with an iPhone 4. So this is not the latest and greatest iPhone here. This was taken years ago. But again, this was taken later in the day. And that's one of my things that I'm going to suggest, that if you have to go outside and take shots outside, try to shoot, if possible, in the morning hours or the late afternoon to early evening hours if you're going to take shots outside. The reason I suggest that is because when the sun is a little lower in the sky, you get better detail. For example, this is a late afternoon shot, and you can see the details on those rocks, and they really, really stand out. If I would have taken that same shot at, say, between 11 and 2, when the sun is higher in the sky, you might have seen some of those details, but not to the same way that you see them here. And so I really am a big proponent of being able to shoot mornings or late afternoons to early evening. It's just going to give your shots a lot more warmth than you would normally have, at high noon. Now, sometimes you don't have that option. You have to get your shots, but that would be, if possible, that would be my suggestion. But as you can see in this shot here, by having the sun lower in the sky, it creates a lot more dramatic, texture to that rock and to that landscape. And I was just really, really happy with the way that turned out. And I was surprised. And again, that's an iPhone 4, so that's multi-generations back. And even at that time, the image sensors and the lenses were really getting better. Again, using light for detail. Use softer light. This is, again, an evening shot. As you can see, you see the detail in the clouds, and you see the detail in the ocean. You see some of the detail in the tidal pools. You see just the wave detail. It's not just a harsh lighting situation. It's just very, very soft light. And it just really creates a much better mood in that particular shot. And don't be afraid to use the sun and use your subjects as a silhouette. Just got my daughter out. We were out fishing one day, and late afternoon, actually this is more like early evening, where the sun's setting. I thought, this would be a really cool shot of just her fishing in silhouette. So don't be afraid to put somebody behind the camera or put an object behind the camera if you want to do a silhouette shot. And again, it's better to do it, like I said, this later part of the day. Obviously, that's when the sun's going to be lower in the sky, but you're going to get the details also in that shot. You can see the rays coming off some of the clouds, how the sun rays are being refracted on that one cloud that's off of Christina's face. And just the details, again, of the water and the details of the leaves and just the detail that's there from using that type of lighting. Again, these are natural lights, again, just using the existing light that I had. The shot on the left was used with existing light, but I did apply a filter to it. I did do some photo manipulation there, but I don't do this often. I was playing around with the new portrait mode lighting that they have on the iPhones. And I just thought that turned out really well. I mean, it's just our dog. He was a puppy at that time. And that's not necessarily being a good photographer. That's being a lucky photographer, where the puppy sat still long enough for me to snap the shot and he was looking straight at me. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good in these instances. The other two shots of my daughter are just using, again, the light that's there. The light that on the certificate shot, it's just off, lights off to the left, and it's not a flat light on her face, so it creates some definition there. And that was just using a little bit of a filter to blur the background as well. The shot of her on her computer, I wanted to test how good that the iPhone 7s were in low light. And this is twilight. And you can see the only thing I'm using to light her face is the screen of the computer. I'm not using any other lights. There's no other light coming from the sun. The sun has gone down behind the trees at this point. So, and it's a lot darker when that photo was taken than it appears. And again, it's like using objects and using the lighting you have to create a real look. That's one of the things that working in television, or sometimes we overlight and we don't create reality. We create a false reality. And sometimes maybe that is the intent, but I never like to make something look like it was lit for a photo or lit for television or video. I like it to look like you were there and that you feel like you're a part of that photo, rather than just making it look like it was artificially lit. And you can always have fun with those photos later. I went around and had fun with that Nike spot that Colin Kaepernick had done, and I thought this would be funny. Oakley had that same look on his face and just said, just destroy stuff around the house for no reason. Just do it. Oakley Edlin. And he does like to destroy stuff around the house. So that there's a reason behind that photo there. Okay, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about aspect ratio. And there's two types of aspect ratio which you shoot, still or even in video. One is portrait, and that's vertical. And in that shot, then again, if your subject matter is going to be going vertically, portrait mode will work effectively. The other is landscape mode. And landscape mode is the typical, 16:9 aspect ratio that you see on your televisions. And it just gives you a lot broader look in the way you see things. I think the way we typically look in our eyes and the way our brain processes everything, 90% of the time is going to be in portrait mode. So I think you always look more right and left than you look up and down. Excuse me, I take a little drink of coffee there. So I try to use landscape for most shots. Again, I've shown you a number of shots that were shot in portrait mode. I felt that there was a reason to shoot those in portrait mode, and because the subject matter was more vertical than horizontal. But in a case like this, on the beach, when you have a nice sunset, you're going to want to basically, use that horizontal aspect ratio to get as much information into that shot as possible. That's a little bit of a panoramic shot there, but still, you want to shoot that in landscape mode. I want to share a couple of video tips with you, and I don't think you're going to hear this.
What are we going to eat?
Can you hear this?
One of these restaurants here, they're everywhere.
I think I'm gonna...
What's the name of this here? Puckett's. Puckett's. We're going to eat at Puckett's today. But folks, there's all kinds of good restaurants all over this.
Can you all hear that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to pause it. Whoops, let me go back there again. I'm going to pause, Larry. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about how you can shoot with video as well. Video has a lot of the same things that you use in still photography. Again, the composition works the same. Rule of thirds works the same. And I'm just going to zip through Larry here real quick. I think I'm going to turn him down because it's really not that interesting. But this is just a walking shot of one of our extension agents, Larry Moorhead. We were shooting a promotional video for Chattanooga, and we were having Larry, who was the most, I'm going to say the most technologically challenged man I've probably ever met. We made him do a video blog, and we shot the whole thing on an iPhone. And we just wanted to see what we could do. But again, lighting. The lighting is using natural lighting. Shooting outside. It's late morning at this point, and we're already getting ready to eat. So you can tell what our priorities were the day of that shoot. But, you know, we didn't light him. We just used what we had. And there's shadows in his face, but that's fine. It's fine to use shadows in the face. I'm going to go, let's go past that. Why am I not going past that? Hold on just a second here. Let me escape out of that. There we go. Here's another one of Larry, just, you know, at a automotive museum we were at in Chattanooga.
This is inside of a convention center.
And it was just basically just showing what you can do and just walking with the shots and just using a little bit of, using the, again, natural lighting we had. No lighting on him, just using the light and just following Larry as he talks about this race car that I believe was in the Indianapolis 500. But I thought it was pretty cool to show that. Okay, I'm going to have to escape out of this thing again. It doesn't do this except for Zoom for some reason. Okay. But there are some other things you need to, oh shoot. Excuse me, folks, I apologize for that. Let me go back to where we were. There's some things you do need to consider when you're shooting in video. And one of the things you need to consider is your video resolution and your frame rate. Now, depending on the storage of your phone, the higher the resolution you have, the bigger the file is going to be. So, for example, you can shoot video in 4K, which is the new high definition. Basically, it's shooting 4 times the resolution of a typical high definition image. What that means is you're taking, these files are massively, massively huge. So if you're going to shoot in 4K, make sure that you have a lot of storage space on your phone. And you may want to even offload some of the photos and videos that are on your phone, put them up in a Google Drive or put them in Amazon Photos, or you can even buy a small drive that you can attach to your phone and offload those photos from your phone. So I would suggest that most shooting you do would be done in 1080p. That's just standard high definition. It's what most people see on their television. Some people have 4K TVs, but most people would shoot in 1080p. It's going to take a lot less space on your phone. And especially for the web, that's going to be plenty. That's going to be great. Even 720p, which is a little lower resolution, but still considered high definition, is going to work great for your photos. Or your videos. It's not going to really be a problem online. The reason I shot that video with Larry in 4K was because I knew that that video would be eventually played on a screen in a conference in standard definition, which is the old-fashioned standard definition. So the bigger the resolution of your file, as it goes down, it's going to look better versus taking a low-resolution photo or video and blowing it up. So that was my reason for going with 4K. And I had to offload a lot of things from my phone to make that work. And I had a 128 gig phone at that point. So yeah, I just want to make sure that you don't want to overload your phone and run out of storage when you're shooting with video.
Doug, we have a question. Yeah. How do you know what resolution you're shooting in?
That's in your camera settings on your phone. If you go into the settings, you can be able to tell where it usually defaults to 1080p. So most phones are not going to default to 4K because, again, for saving storage. And they're going to default to that, not the highest resolution possible. But it is in the camera settings on your phone, under the settings icon, and that's on an iPhone. That's where that would be located. I'm sorry, I haven't been checking the questions very often. I'm sure you all have a lot, and I'm not trying to ignore anybody here. Just some things to remember with audio. Audio is just as important in video as the photo, as the image, because you've got to be able to hear what you're talking about. So consider the environment when you are recording audio. video. Know the limitations of the stock microphone. The stock microphone on a camera can get you good audio about 8 feet away from the subject, and that's about as far away as you want to get. And also considering the environment. If you're in a loud environment, it's going to be hard to hear that person, especially if you're not using a lavalier mic, and you might want to consider getting one of those. You can get them very inexpensively. A lot of this equipment that you can get for your smartphones is not high-end stuff. It's not very, very expensive. It's maybe $50, maybe $25. You can get a good on the Best Buy, and they can help hook you up with some of that, or any of your big box stores. And you want to monitor what you're recording. You want to be able to listen to what's being recorded, because you may think, oh, that was really good, and the person I was recording said some really great things, and then you get back and you're going to edit it or you're going to post it, and you're like, I can't hear a word this person's saying. So just remember to try, if you can, monitor what you're recording as well. Also consider investing in a tripod. Tripods are very, very inexpensive, and they can help you get some nice, steady shots in either photos or videos. Even though the lenses now have optical image stabilization, and it does help a lot, it still is not a substitute for using a tripod when you're shooting video or your still photos. And I'm going to close it out with some top tips to remember, and hopefully get back to your questions and help answer and try to answer some of your questions. So these are just some top tips to remember shooting photos primarily, but it can also work for video. One of the top tips is to clean your lens. This thing is sitting in your pocket or in a bag or somewhere almost all the time. And when you pick it up, you're probably going to touch your lens. You're going to smudge it up. Some cameras, especially Samsungs, have fingerprint sensors on the back, and it's very, very close to the lens. And it's so easy to, when you unlock the phone with your fingerprint, to accidentally touch the lens and get your finger marks all over it. So before you shoot, pull out your camera, wipe off your lens. All these lenses use sapphire glass, so you're not going to scratch them. You can probably just use your shirt tail to do it. You don't have to use a special cleaning cloth, but just get the smudges and the dust and all that other junk off your lens. Set your focus manually. You can actually do this on the phones by holding down on the center screen, and you'll see a square come up, and that will lock your focus. It will lock your focus and your exposure. And that way, when the subject is there, you don't have to worry about if you move slightly or you do something. Your focus is there, especially if your subject is moving. The camera doesn't know. The camera doesn't know what to focus on sometimes, and the camera's dumb. They call it a smartphone, but the camera's not that bright, and it's looking for something to focus on. And if the object is moving constantly, it's going in and out of focus, and it's just not aesthetically pleasing to the person who's looking at your photo or watching your video. And it's very hard to shoot it too, because it comes in and out of focus. So I would just recommend setting your focus manually, as well as setting your exposure manually. Again, by doing that same process where you push down on the screen until that yellow square shows up. You'll notice on the left or on the right of that square, you'll see a little thing that looks like a sun. And if you take that up or down, that opens your exposure and closes your exposure. So you can keep your shots from getting overexposed, because the camera might think, well, or underexposed especially, because the camera always thinks, oh, I got to compensate for the brightest thing that's in that shot. And so your image may be dark. So just think about, you can just go ahead and bring the exposure up just a little bit. And by the way, in case you guys were wondering, I never had been there in my 20 years at UT. That's the UT Space Institute. That's their dining area outside. I'm jealous when I went there. They have a beautiful beautiful setting out there. And I was like, man, I wish we could have something like that where we could go eat lunch, but I just had to take a shot of that. Don't use the zoom. Most cameras, especially the single lens cameras, don't have an optical zoom on them. Now you have optical zoom on a DSLR and on some point and shoot cameras, but on a smartphone, if you're zooming in and it'll let you zoom in, all you're doing is cropping data away, and you're going to have more, possibilities of getting a very grainy shot. So don't don't use the zoom on the camera. If you've got to get closer to an object, use your feet to zoom. Even when I taught classes at UT about field production and electronic news gathering, when I taught the videography section, I said, do not zoom that camera. And the reason I said don't use the zoom is because your eye doesn't zoom. If you've ever noticed that, you know, our eyes don't zoom. We're not like Geordie LaForge on Star Trek: The Next Generation, whose eyes could zoom in on things because he had, you know, special lenses, you know, built into his eyes. We don't have that option. So you always want to use your feet to zoom. Get closer to the subject and take the photo. So don't use the zoom on the camera, if at all possible. Use unique perspectives. I like to do a lot of shots where I'm looking up at something. I like to look up at trees or up at the sky or have things pointing up. You know, just don't, you know, you can take things head on, but sometimes I think using a unique perspective really helps. Don't be afraid to get close to something. Actually, I helped my daughter with this shot and she took it. But just this was a seashell. We shot this on our back deck. But again, using the lighting and using the perspective and getting in tight to something. Don't be afraid to get close to something, unless it's a rattlesnake. I wouldn't get too close to that. But get close, but get close to your subjects. It's amazing the detail that's going to come out. And it's just, I'm fascinated by that. This is a shot here. This was in the Smokies. We were just taking a hike one day. This may look like cliffs. This is actually tight on a little bit of rocks and some moss on the rocks. That's all that is. And I just got in tight. I love to get in tight on photos and take really tight shots. And again, it comes down to discovering new things in that photo every time you look at it. It's not just the same shot over and over again. You see something different. Or the sky, using the lighting of the sky to look at the clouds and just, you know, get that perspective out there. Use the light to get those unique perspectives that you just don't see every day. Again, getting close to your subject. Get down with that puppy and get that shot. And get close to that shot. And again, it's also, again, there's a lot of luck in here, folks, because that puppy sat still long enough for me to take that shot. It's like you have to be quick on the draw to get shots with animals. Get down. This is the grass. This is just a shot. We had a yard sale one day outside of the house. I got bored, so there weren't a lot of people coming by, so I was out just taking shots. Just the dew on the grass. Just getting down. I had to lay down to get that shot and lay down on my stomach. But there's a little bit of a lens flare in it. And just getting, you know, right down next to your subject, getting close to your subject. You know, this is a little cleat. It's not that big of a cleat, but it's on a dock. This was the same night my daughter was out fishing. And, you know, just getting down there, sometimes you got to lay down to get the shot. Sometimes you got to get down low and get that shot and get that unique perspective. And just, it's something that's just different. Use archways to help frame down into the picture. Just downtown on Market Square in Knoxville, just walking around one night. This was not a planned photo shoot. It's just like, oh, that's kind of a cool shot. I think I'm going to take a shot of that. Again, just using something to frame the shot. But don't overprocess. I did not take this photo, but you'll notice that you'll see a lot of overprocessing on shots, especially on Facebook, especially with color. The color is so saturated, and it's like, wow. I mean, it's not natural. It becomes unnatural. And what I think is really interesting is there are so many filters now on cameras, and some of you may be old enough to remember, I do. I got a Kodak Instamatic when I was a kid. And I took photos with that thing, and it had that Instamatic look of overexposed, underexposed, grainy, all that other stuff. And when Instagram came out, guess what they did? They made you have photos that look just like that. Oh. I'm thinking, back when I was a kid, if we could have had the quality of photos from a little thing like this that we get now, we would have killed to have that. And now they want to go back and degrade the photos and overprocess them and do all this other stuff to them. So don't overprocess the photos, because if you do, people might think this. I think this might be photoshopped. And that's going to take away from the reality of the photo, unless you really are trying to make an artistic statement. Then processing is a little bit better. But again, I'm a news guy. That's my background. I like to shoot reality as it happens. But I think the main thing to remember when you're shooting your photos is to just have a good time. Just have fun. You can't make a mistake. It's kind of like the old Bob Ross shows. You know, you have happy accidents, and I've had a lot of happy accidents in my photography, and it's really helped me improve. Always don't be too critical of yourself, but kind of be a little bit of a critic as well, because we can always improve. No matter what we do in our photos, we can always make them better. I've been doing this since 1987, and I still can get better. You never stop improving, so never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop taking a couple of risks, and I don't mean dangerous risks, but risks with your photography that might be different, that might be fun, and you say, wow, I didn't realize that I could do that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my share, and I'm going to answer some of your questions, and I hope these are not too dated. So I'm going to go down and how to use phone settings to capture images like this or for a different seminar. The phone settings that I used were the stock camera app that came with the iPhone itself. Then the stock camera app today has a lot of really, really good features to it. You can get in there now and you can actually go back and adjust exposure, adjust your color, make some adjustments to your photos. You can put filters on them like Instagram did, same type of thing. But I would highly recommend that you go and experiment with those. If you bought one of the later iPhones, the ones that have just come out, they do have the portrait mode, which is really not, it's done through software, it's not done through optics. And a lot of the things on smartphones are done that way. But you can actually go into those photos now and adjust the blur of the background, or what we call the bokeh effect. So you can go in there and make it as blurry as you want or not as blurry as you want. So you can change that if you have an iPhone XS or I believe a XR. Those do have that option. How do we know what resolution we're shooting in? Okay, so that's just what I have to basically have for this seminar. I enjoy shooting with a smartphone. I have about 4,000. I think I have about 4,000 pictures on my camera roll. iCloud loves me because I pay for extra storage to keep these things up there. But it's just something you can have fun with. You can experiment with. And the nice thing about digital photography compared to film photography is that it's harder to make a mistake in digital photography. When you had film photography, you put a roll of film in your camera, and you might have had 12 shots, 24 shots, who knows, something like that. And I guess from a perspective of being a better photographer, it made you plan your shots more because film was expensive. It was expensive to develop the film unless you were really skilled at developing and you could go out and do it yourself. So you really had to plan your shots at that time. You don't really plan as much with digital because, oh, I don't like it, delete. I don't like it, delete. Okay, I can take it again, delete. So it's kind of taken a little bit of that planning aspect away from photography that we used to have to do when we had limited amounts of medium or media to put our photos on or our video. We don't have that anymore. We can the only thing that's going to stop you is if your storage fills up. That's all. That's your limitation. Other than that, you can just keep going on with your phone, and that's all you have to do with that. And with that, I just want to open it up to any questions. If any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this point. I know we have a little bit of time left. It usually takes me about 15 minutes to go through this, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
If you have any questions for Doug, please enter them in the chat box, and he'll be glad to answer those. I thank you so much for joining us as we wrap up and wait for any questions to come in. Doug, you have some spectacular shots there, and it makes me want to go out and just try at least and maybe get lucky and try to implement some of what you have told us about. It's so neat what you can do with that little camera in your pocket.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing what these do now. It really, really, really is amazing what you can do with a camera now. Like I said, they're not replacing a DSLR yet. That's still, if you're really, really, really into photography, you're going to still, you might be disappointed with it. I'm not disappointed with an iPhone because I know its limitations and I know what it can and can't do. So I don't expect it to replace a DSLR at this point. I think maybe in about 5 years, with software improvements and lens improvements and image sensor improvements, I think it's going to give them a run for their money. But at this point, it's still not quite there yet. So that's why I wanted to focus primarily on smartphones, because especially if you're using this for social media and you're using it for your websites, the majority of what you're going to do is going to be off your smartphone, and it's going to be with you, and you're going to be able to capture things for your business or for whatever you want to do for promotions or anything like that.
Okay, we do have a question.
Okay.
Do we have to reformat for the medium that you're posting to, I guess, for email or website or social media?
Usually what social media will do, they have their own resolution back. You know, there may be an issue with that, but social media is getting better at compressing the photos down to, you know, fit their unique perspectives. For email, for example, an iPhone, and I don't know if Android, and please forgive my ignorance on Android here, but an iPhone will allow you an option to email somebody a photo for it to come down in full resolution or a lower resolution. And if you're sending somebody a photo just to take a look at, I would send it at a medium resolution. I wouldn't send it at full resolution because sometimes those are 3 megs and those are big photos. And a lot of times, even with UT email, which is pretty robust, it will blow up our emails. So I would just, you know, go with medium resolution. Any other questions? I always say the best way to become a better photographer is to just take a lot of photos. It's like I said, it's a type of thing you can teach some things in this, but you really don't learn until you get out and do, and make mistakes. And, you know, I've made plenty of mistakes, and what mistakes are called is experience. And I have a lot of experience because I've made a lot of mistakes as well in my shooting, but I've learned from it. And that's the thing. It's a lot of fun. It's something we can go out and you can have a good time and get some really cool shots, and don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try unique angles. Don't be afraid to get down close to something. You know, get that perspective that, you know, not everybody sees all the time, that we see from, you know, our typical 5 foot, like I would see from my 5'10" perspective every day. Try something different and get in good and close to stuff. And I just think you see things in photos that you didn't realize that were there. And again, that's my favorite thing, is to look back at a photo and say, oh, I didn't realize that was there. Or, wow, that's pretty cool. There's something I didn't see before. And that's just what I like about taking photos, and just something unique about them.
Great. And without having to use film, you aren't wasting money, and you can see things immediately on your screen. It's kind of neat, and adjust and try something else. It's not what you're looking for.
Exactly. That's the best part. And if you do want to go in and do some, you know, processing within reason, so people don't think it's Photoshop, you have that in your camera app. The stock camera apps are getting much better. There are some apps that you can buy that take it a step further. One is called Camera Plus, which is a very good app. It allows you to even do some macro shots, and you can really, really get manual control of your images in Camera Plus. And that may be something you really want to do, and get very manual with exposures and focus and depth of field and all of that. The f-stop, it goes down to f-stops. I mean, it's almost like having a regular DSLR camera. So if you're really into that, I would recommend looking at Camera Plus. That takes it the next step up. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to turn it back to you, Megan.
Oh goodness, I am talking away unmuted.
I do that.
Oh goodness. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. Please take a moment to complete the brief evaluation online that helps us give feedback to our reporting agency or our granting agency. It also helps me to decide what we're going to cover in the next 6 months if you have topics that you would like to see in the remainder of our webinar series. We would greatly appreciate you taking a minute to do that. The link is in your chat box and on the screen now, I believe. And we look forward to seeing you in January. I'll get information about what topics we'll have in the new year pretty soon. So thank you, Doug, so much. That was a remarkable presentation, and I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did too.
Well, thank you, Megan. I hope you were able to get something. You all were able to get something out of it. Just a little something, at least, to take away.
Absolutely.